So many of us leave the hospital with a certain type or kind of ostomy supply. We may not know that, in fact, there are other options available, or that the ones that we were given at the hospital or by our home health care nurses after we're discharged home are not working for us because of certain reasons. I'll teach you about understanding your body and your stoma profile, explain how the different products work and work together, and how to talk to your medical supply company about ordering products. Now, speaking of medical supply companies, I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce who we are. We are Better Health, and we are a new type of medical supply provider. We have taken a holistic approach to your healthcare journey, and that means not only do we provide medical products, but we also provide educational resources for how to use them. So we have this ostomy class series. We also offer a member exclusive benefit called peer coaching, where you have time for a one-on-one session with one of our peer coaches to talk through and overcome some specific issues you may be having. I'd also like to introduce myself. My name is Siobhan, and I lead ostomy education here at Better Health. I've had an ostomy for 6 years, so I am very familiar, and we probably share a lot of the same issues around leaks and overnight explosions and products that are giving us problems. My goal for you at the end of this presentation is for you to be able to describe your body and your stoma profile, and also to describe your product needs to someone else. The reality is that you're going to be asking someone at your medical supply company like Better Health to find product numbers for you or make recommendations. But if you can say that your stoma is this way, or your barrier has to cover a certain set of incisions, that person will probably have the tools to help you find the right products. Often there's a 6-week period right after surgery where you're kind of concerned with what should I eat, or should I call the doctor about this thing? Should my stoma look like that? How do I change my pouch? Where do I get my ostomy supplies? And when we finally get to the point where we need to order ostomy supplies for ourselves, we don't know where to go. You finally get yourself connected to a medical supply company, and they say, "What do you want?" And you have this deer in the headlights look. Like, I don't know what I want. You tell me, you're the expert. So that's a problem if you call different ostomy supply companies, because you might be speaking to somebody who isn't very knowledgeable or trained. At Better Health, we definitely have the knowledge and are trained on what sort of ostomy products work for different people. So where do you start? You start by understanding that there is no one-size-fits-all ostomy product solution. I get asked a lot, what do you use, or what is the best system out there? And I'm happy to tell you what I use, but what I use may not actually work for you. And the best system is not necessarily one of the products that you can pinpoint, but it's the system that keeps you and your stoma and your peristomal skin, that means the skin around your stoma, happy and healthy. The best system is the one you put together because it fits your exact lifestyle needs. The first thing you need to know is what kind of ostomy you have. Believe it or not, and I know I'm not the only one, but I thought all ostomies were called colostomies. And in fact, that's not the case. I didn't know there were different types of ostomies until, I hate to admit it, but like a year after my own surgery. Understand your stoma size and shape. This is especially helpful when you're describing your product needs to somebody like me during a coaching session, or if you're ordering your supplies. So I'll teach you a little bit more about how to recognize what type of stoma you have and how to measure it. And then finally, you should understand that the range of products available to you can really enhance your experience with the barrier. So don't be afraid to ask questions about what kind of barrier you're getting, especially if you're trying to deal with managing things like leaks and irritation. So as I said, when I was coming out of the hospital, I wasn't even sure what kind of ostomy I had. You could have told me, hey, you have a pterodactyl-y ostomy, and I would have been like, cool, my surgery is named after a dinosaur. But my misunderstanding is your gain. So briefly, let's go over the different types of ostomies. First, there's a colostomy, and a colostomy is a stoma attached to your large intestine, and your output can be semi-form to form, and you might even have regular bowel movements. It's good to know that with a colostomy, you can use either open or closed bags, meaning you can either drain the bag into the toilet or fill up a closed bag and throw it away and replace it with another closed bag. An ileostomy is very, very similar to a colostomy in that it also deals with stool. However, the major difference is that with a colostomy, it attaches to the small intestines. So the small intestines aren't really where the stool is compacted. That's in the large intestines. So the liquid from an ileostomy is liquid or semi-formed. But your stoma is always active because your small intestines are usually almost always active. So you can expect some little dribbles of output pretty much all the time. With an ileostomy, you should always use a drainable bag because with ileostomies, you may not know when to expect a bowel movement. It can be very, very random. And so it might fill up very unexpectedly. And the bag, if you're using a closed bag, it may not be able to contain all the output. Now, different from a colostomy and an ileostomy is a urostomy. And a urostomy has to do with urine. It's a stoma that connects to the ureters and it drains urine from the kidneys. So the output is always going to be liquid. And it's always going to be pretty continuous. It's good to know that you should only use urostomy bags. You cannot interchange urostomy bags with colostomy bags or ileostomy bags, because urostomy bags are specially designed to keep urine from backwashing over the stoma. And the reason that that's important is because urine is a place where bacteria like to breed, and you don't want to be reintroducing bacteria into your stoma because that might cause a UTI. All right, moving on to understanding stomas and body shapes. We all have different body shapes, and especially after surgery, we're going to be dealing with a whole new body geography or topography. There's a lot of different types of stomas, and sometimes they're more inny, like an inny belly button, and sometimes they're more outy, like an outy belly button. What you end up is really highly dependent on your internal structure. So if you're describing what you have to someone else, they'll be able to help you find what you need. For instance, if you have a retracted stoma, you're probably going to need a barrier that has some convexity to it. So you need help pushing that stoma out and away from your skin because otherwise your stoma will be putting output and the output won't fall down into the bag like it should. And additionally, if that output is sitting around the stoma because it's retracted, you'll be at greater risk for leaks and skin irritation because that output is going to be acidic and wearing the barrier down faster. So take a hand mirror and take a good look at your stoma. Some folks are not very comfortable with this and they're kind of grossed out. I was definitely grossed out in the beginning. I could barely stand to look at my stoma. But I also wanted to stop having skin irritation and leaks all the time. So I kind of took a deep breath and I said, it's my body. It's helping me live. I'm going to do this. The benefit of doing that also is in the future, if you notice a change in your stoma and you're used to looking at looking at it and seeing that it's bigger or smaller or swollen, you'll be able to identify problems more earlier on. Stomas also have different shapes. So it's important to know that your barrier opening should match your stoma shape as closely as possible. You don't want a lot of skin showing around the opening between your barrier and your stoma because that will lead to skin irritation and leaks. So when you cut your barriers, you should make sure that you're cutting your barriers to match the shape of the stoma. And if you have an irregularly shaped stoma, which happens quite often, you're not alone, you can use products like barrier paste, stoma paste, or barrier rings under your ostomy barrier to help adjust and solve for a stoma that doesn't fit perfectly in a circle. Where your stoma is placed on your body will also affect the type of barriers you use. So some barriers have a really nice wide coverage area of, usually 5 inches, and some barriers have really small coverage areas. So depending on if you have an incision or if your stoma is in a fold or a crease, you may have to try different barrier sizes, try out different products to play around with what barrier is going to fit best over not only your stoma, but any creases or incisions or belly buttons that are in the way. So for instance, my belly button is in the way, and the way that I deal with that problem is actually by turning my barrier 90 degrees. So it still get the full barrier coverage, but the long side is up and down versus side to side. Before we get into some real life examples and problem solving, I want to say a quick word about ostomy products and brand manufacturers. A lot of times it's not explained to you how to use these products. So that's what I'm going to do. The first product that you should know about are barrier sprays and wipes. And barrier sprays and wipes go down first on that clean skin when you're getting ready to change your barrier. So you've taken off your old system, you clean the skin with gentle soap and water, you've dried it off. Now is the time to apply the barrier spray or wipe. It's the same product, just available in 2 different ways. The barrier spray goes down, it leaves a clear and it's almost unnoticeable protection on the skin, but it does 2 things. It protects the skin from output if output should get on the skin, and it also sort of primes the surface of your skin to help the barrier adhere better. Now there's also Stoma powder. So Stoma powder is a little bit of a misnomer. The powder actually goes around on the skin around the stoma and not on the stoma itself. But the reason you might want to use Stoma powder is if you are experiencing a lot of moisture, either from body sweat, maybe you're getting outside in the hot sun playing a round of golf, or you're coming in and you live in a humid environment, so your barrier is absorbing moisture faster. Or if you have a high output ostomy, like a urostomy or an ileostomy, your barrier is going to absorb moisture more moisture more quickly because it's constantly exposed to moisture. So Stoma powder can help extend the life of the barrier by helping absorb extra moisture. And then finally, there's pastes and barrier rings. You might have heard me mention these earlier. These are like caulking in your bathroom. They form a flexible, watertight seal. Sometimes we don't cut our barriers perfectly, or our stoma shrinks or grows a little bit while we're wearing our ostomy pouches. And so the barrier paste and the barrier rings, which again are just 2 sort of versions of the same thing, help for that expansion and that contraction. Now, these products are mix and match. You don't have to use all of them, but you can use what works for you. And sometimes you might even rotate some of these products in and out of your routine depending on your changing needs. All of these products are available from your medical supply company. Better Health certainly carries all of these products, and they are usually paid for by insurance at whatever rate you're paying for your ostomy supplies. There's about 4 major manufacturers in the United States. And I also get a question is, which manufacturer do you like? Well, I actually do have a very strong personal preference, but I've also met people who have equally strong personal preference for different manufacturers. So again, it's up to you to request samples from the manufacturers and try out different products, and you'll usually find that you gravitate toward one or the other. But the good news is that if you like a particular manufacturer, you'll discover that not only do they make their own version of all the particular support products that you may want, but they make a version of the barrier in the bag that you need. So, all of the manufacturers make a version of convexity. Some of them offer different levels of convexity. All of the manufacturers offer a 1-piece or a 2-piece. They offer extended wear barriers or drainable bags. So don't worry if you like a particular manufacturer of a product, you should be able to find what you need from them. Sometimes it's really useful to give examples in terms of case studies to help illustrate what sort of product buildup that you're going to want to do. So I'll start with myself. Putting together an ostomy system is like building a recipe. You have to find all the ingredients and figure out how they work together. So here are some characteristics about my own ostomy. I have an ileostomy, which is a high output ostomy. I have a fairly normal stoma, so it's pretty round, and I'm actually very grateful for that. But I do have a lot of output, and so I do need something like an extended wear barrier, and I do need the extra support. For some reason, even though I've tried one-piece ostomy systems multiple times, just seeing if maybe this time it'll work, I always revert back to the 2-piece system. So I started out with products that were given to me in the hospital, and I had a clip closure bag, which I hope you don't choose to deal with. A clip closure is literally a clip that you attach to the bottom of the bag after you drain it, and you have to roll it up and do the clip. I found the clip so hard to work with. I started using barrier wipes, and I was using some barrier rings under the barrier because that's what I was told to do at the hospital. I also used an adhesive remover, but it was a strange one that I bought from an online retailer, and it was very oily and it left a big residue. So it kind of started out at a deficit in the beginning. I felt like this whole process was just not gross, but definitely cumbersome and messy. I discovered that I had an allergic reaction to the barrier that I was given in the hospital. And I went, well, that's silly. I mean, isn't everybody using this barrier? Certainly I'm not the only one having an allergic reaction. Well, what I did was to go see a wound care nurse at my hospital, and she recommended using a barrier that doesn't have any acrylic tape. And acrylic tape is that sort of woven material that's similar to what you see in Band-Aids often. So she recommended trying a hydrocolloid barrier, and a hydrocolloid barrier is made from gel. There's no tape involved. And I switched product manufacturers, and I stopped having that problem with the skin irritation. What I ended up with in the long run is a system from Coloplast that I built up. I'm using a 2-piece system with a hydrocolloid barrier. I have a high output bag to accommodate for my ileostomy. I use a barrier spray now instead of a barrier wipe. It seems less messy. I use a barrier paste that's actually from a different company than the one from Coloplast. Seems to work really well for me. And then I use barrier extender strips just because the barrier extender strips really help cover up some more area and make my barrier last longer. Okay, so now let's talk about Dave. Dave's story is a little different from mine. And Dave came to me for help for a couple of reasons. He was experiencing a lot of skin issues and leaks and the pain that goes along with that. And I learned he was having to change his appliance every day. Dave started with a flat barrier. And upon talking with Dave, I learned that he actually has a stoma that's retracted in any stoma. And it needs to be, it needs a convex barrier, not a flat barrier, because the flat barrier won't help that stoma stick out far enough for output to fall down. And his flat barrier was leading him to a lot of leaks. Now, I also learned that Dave was still adjusting to his ostomy. So he was really hesitant to drain his ostomy output into a toilet. Dave was running out of bags, and if you are using closed bags, you get 60 a month. So that's quite a lot of ostomy bags to use in 1 month. Well, I figured out that Dave was actually using drainable bags and treating them as closed bags. So of course he was running out, because with drainable bags, you're meant to use them, 3 to 5 days or so, and then that means that if you do the math, you should really only use 5 to 6 a month. And usually Medicare and other insurances will allow for up to 20 drainable bags a month. So to sum up, Dave should be using a closed ostomy bag and not a open drainable bag, because he will get more bags that way paid through his insurance. So what Dave ended up with was a convex barrier, a 2-piece ostomy system so he could swap out his bags regularly. And he started using those closed bags so he wouldn't run out of bags every month. And then I advised Dave to use some barrier paste and some stoma powder. The stoma powder would help treat his skin because it was a little raw and weepy from having to change the appliance every day. So that stoma powder provided a protective cover. And then the barrier paste is going to help with flexibility and making sure that there are no leaks seeping in under the barrier from the stoma. So Dave's problems are actually very, very common, and I've heard his story before. In the last little part of our presentation, let's continue going over some other frequent problems we all have. One of the major problems that many ostomates deal with are blowouts. Now, a blowout is when your pouch suddenly overfills and it's so full that either the bottom opens up because of the pressure inside the pouch or it escapes underneath the barrier. So some things you can try to manage it. Burp your pouch, especially at night or even during the day. Just step into the restroom and let the air out. Reduce gas-causing foods or drinks. Gas-causing drinks include carbonated drinks and drinking with a straw, which can introduce extra air into your digestive system. Gas-causing foods include onions, beans, cauliflower, broccoli, things like that. And then finally, eat your last meal earlier on in the day. And the reason that I recommend this is that if your digestive system is active, then it's processing the food and passing it out sooner rather than in the middle of the night. In terms of products, what could help are filtered pouches. Pouches are usually available with filters or without filters. And if you're having frequent blowouts, but maybe not so much gas, paste or barrier rings can help secure your ostomy barrier to your skin more strongly. If you notice that you're frequently getting output under the barrier, there's a few things that you can try. First, remeasure your stoma. Our stomas can shrink or grow, and it could be that your barrier opening is not adequate to your stoma size. And that means, you really only want 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters between the edge of the barrier opening and the stoma. Otherwise, there's a potential for the output to sneak in under the barrier. And then, of course, ensure dips, creases, and dimples are filled in. So ways that you can do that when you're applying the barrier are to use some barrier paste or rings again, and try a more rigid barrier. And the reason that you want to ensure dips and creases are filled in prior to putting on your barrier is you want to create an even surface for your barrier to adhere to. Incisions, belly buttons, and bulges. Now, as I said, we pretty much all have creases and bulges and other things. So it's part of being a human. It's very natural to our human bodies. And then if you've had surgery recently, of course, you're going to see some changes. So there's not really a ton you can do with incisions and belly buttons beyond just using barrier extender strips. You can't move them out of the way, so you have to work around them. You can trim your barrier if you need to if there's a wound that's still draining, you could certainly trim out a little, half circle from your barrier edge. Rotate your barrier like I described earlier that I do. Barrier strips, again, you can actually use these either around the barrier or even under the barrier before you place the barrier on, and that can just extend your working area in terms of getting an even surface. And then there are such a thing as extra large barriers. I've seen barriers up to 6 inches on a side, and they can be very, very helpful, especially if you A, have a large stoma, or B, just need a lot of barrier to help secure it to your skin. All right, we're almost at the end of our ostomy class on customizing products. And I have a few conclusions and key takeaways. These are the things that I want you to remember, even if you forget everything else I said today. So one size does not fit all. You don't have to stick with the products that the hospital gave you. In fact, you should be getting samples from all of the product manufacturers. And if you aren't, we can help you find them. Be able to describe your stoma and your body profile to somebody else so that they can help you pick out products that will work best for you. And then finally, be willing to experiment. So it can be a little intimidating to try different ostomy barriers, especially if you're not sure how they're going to work for you. And then there's a potential for them failing and you ending up with something, you ending up with a mess. So, be prepared that if you do try something different, you have your old system on standby so you can quickly swap them out. And at the very least, you have the knowledge about what doesn't work for you, which can definitely still contribute to finding what does work for you. Do you still need more advice about customizing your ostomy products? Well, Better Health members have exclusive access to ostomy peer coaching. We will provide you a one-on-one session with one of our fantastic peer coaches. They also have ostomies, and it'll help you work through any sort of specific issues you're having with your products, but also, just adjusting to life with an ostomy. Thank you so much for joining us today in our Ostomy Products customization class. We'll see you in our next one.